There are forgotten corners of the world where history refuses to make sense. Massive stone chambers built without mortar, aligned to celestial events. Mysterious artifacts unearthed far from where they should be. And ancient structures that seem to predate the people we've always believed built them. These aren't fringe theories or internet speculation. These are real, physical sites, documented, measured, and photographed, that continue to baffle mainstream archaeologists and historians to this day. In the quiet forests and rolling hills of New York State, we find patterns that shouldn't exist. Burial mounds with strange architecture, rock carvings with no known origin, and a network of stone walls that serve no modern explanation. Tonight, we're diving deep into these forgotten mysteries, exploring evidence that challenges our assumptions about who was here before us and what they might have known. Before we begin, just a quick note: the visuals help tell the story, but they aren't required to follow along. Feel free to listen while you relax, work, or drift off to sleep. And if you enjoy diving into the unknown with me, consider subscribing to the channel to support future explorations. Let's begin our journey into the ancient secrets hidden in plain sight, right here in New York. Hidden beneath the dense forests of Putnam County, New York, lie some of the most puzzling structures in North America. These aren't the grand temples of distant civilizations or the towering monuments we've come to associate with ancient mysteries. Instead, they're humble stone chambers, built without mortar, tucked away in places where most people would never think to look. Yet these simple structures have confounded historians, archaeologists, and researchers for centuries, raising questions that still have no clear answers. The stone chambers of Putnam County are deceptively simple in appearance. Most are small, roughly rectangular rooms built entirely from carefully fitted stones. No cement holds them together, no mortar fills the gaps between the blocks. Instead, each stone has been precisely placed, relying on weight, friction, and ingenious engineering to stay in place. Some chambers are so perfectly constructed that even after centuries of weathering, freeze-thaw cycles, and the relentless growth of tree roots, they remain structurally sound. What makes these chambers so mysterious isn't just their construction, but their sheer number and distribution. Scattered throughout Putnam County, dozens of these structures have been documented, with new ones still being discovered. They vary in size from small root cellars to larger rooms that could comfortably house several people. Some are built into hillsides, their stone walls blending seamlessly with the natural rock formations. Others stand free, their carefully corbelled roofs creating dome-like spaces that seem to defy the passage of time. The most famous of these chambers sits on private property near the town of Kent. This particular structure has drawn researchers from around the world, not just for its impressive construction, but for the tantalizing clues it might hold about its builders. The chamber is roughly 12 feet long, 8 feet wide, and tall enough for an average person to stand upright inside. Its walls are built from local granite and schist, stones that would have required considerable effort to quarry, transport, and shape without modern tools. But here's where the mystery deepens. No one knows who built these chambers when they were constructed or what purpose they served. The official archaeological consensus has long been that they're root cellars built by 18th or 19th century European settlers. After all, stone root cellars were common in colonial New England, used to store vegetables, dairy products, and other perishables in the days before refrigeration. The theory makes sense on the surface, but it falls apart under closer examination. For one thing, many of these chambers are located in areas that were never suitable for farming. They're built on steep hillsides, in rocky terrain, or in locations that would have been incredibly difficult to access with a horse and cart loaded with produce. Some are so remote that reaching them today requires a significant hike through dense forest. Why would colonial farmers go to such extraordinary lengths to build root cellars in locations that were impractical for their intended purpose? Then there's the question of construction technique. While European settlers certainly knew how to build with stone, The chambers of Putnam County display a level of skill and sophistication that seems unusual for simple agricultural storage. The corbelled roofs, in particular, require a deep understanding of engineering principles. Each stone must be carefully shaped and positioned to create an arch that can support its own weight without collapsing. This isn't the kind of technique you'd expect from farmers who just needed a place to store turnips. Some researchers have noted striking similarities between these chambers and ancient stone structures found in Ireland, Scotland, and other parts of Europe. The dry stone construction technique, the corbelled roofs, and even the overall proportions bear a remarkable resemblance to Bronze Age and Iron Age structures found across the Celtic world. This has led to speculation that the chambers might have been built by pre-Columbian visitors to North America, perhaps Celtic explorers who arrived centuries before Columbus ever set sail. The Celtic theory gained traction in the 1970s and 80s, fueled by researchers who pointed to other possible evidence of ancient European presence in the Americas. They noted that some of the chambers align with astronomical events, just like ancient stone circles in Europe. They found markings on the stones that resembled agam, an ancient Irish writing system. They even suggested that the chambers might have been built as places of worship or ritual, continuing traditions that stretch back to the megalithic builders of prehistoric Europe. But the Celtic theory has its problems too. There's no solid archaeological evidence that Celtic peoples ever reached North America in pre-Columbian times. The supposed agam inscriptions have been disputed by linguistic experts, who argue that they're more likely natural markings or scratches made by more recent visitors. And the astronomical alignments, while intriguing, could easily be coincidental. After all, if you build enough structures, some of them are bound to line up with celestial events by pure chance. This brings us to perhaps the most intriguing theory of all, that the stone chambers were built by indigenous peoples long before European contact. Native American groups had been living in the Hudson Valley region for thousands of years before the first European ships appeared on the horizon. They had intimate knowledge of the local landscape, access to the same stone materials, and certainly the engineering skills necessary to build these structures. Some researchers have suggested that the chambers served ceremonial or spiritual purposes for indigenous communities. The careful orientation of certain chambers toward cardinal directions or celestial events could indicate that they were used for astronomical observations or seasonal rituals. The remote locations, rather than being a drawback, might have been deliberately chosen for their isolation and connection to the natural world. There are tantalizing hints that support the indigenous theory. Some chambers have been found to contain artifacts that predate European settlement. Others show signs of use that suggest they served purposes beyond simple storage. But proving definitively that indigenous peoples built these structures remains challenging, partly because oral traditions that might have preserved knowledge of their construction have been lost or disrupted by centuries of colonization. What makes the Putnam County chambers even more mysterious is their apparent age. While some clearly show signs of recent use or modification, others display weathering patterns and vegetation growth that suggest they've been in place for far longer than colonial settlement would allow. Lichens that take decades or centuries to establish have covered some stones completely. Tree roots have grown through and around the structures in ways that indicate considerable age. Attempts to date the chambers using scientific method have yielded frustratingly inconclusive results. Radiocarbon dating requires organic material, which is often absent from dry stone construction. The stones themselves can't be dated unless they contain specific minerals that formed at known times, and the lack of associated artifacts means there are few objects that can provide clues about when the chambers were built or used. One of the most compelling aspects of the Putnam County chambers is their distribution. They're not randomly scattered across the landscape, but seem to follow patterns that suggest systematic planning. Some appear to be positioned along ancient travel routes, possibly marking pathways through the forest. Others cluster around water sources or natural landmarks. A few seem to be placed at points where they would be visible from one another, creating a network of stone structures across the landscape. This raises the possibility that the chambers weren't isolated storage facilities, but part of a larger system. Perhaps they served as way stations for travelers, providing shelter or marking important locations. Maybe they were used for seasonal ceremonies, with different chambers serving specific purposes at different times of year. Or they could have been territorial markers, claiming ownership or establishing boundaries in a landscape that was far from empty before European arrival. The mystery is complicated by the fact that some chambers show clear evidence of modification and reuse over time. Stones have been added or rearranged, openings have been enlarged or reduced, and some structures appear to have been partially dismantled and rebuilt. This suggests that, whatever their original purpose, the chambers continue to serve some function for later inhabitants of the region. Local folklore has preserved various stories about the stone chambers, though separating historical memory from more recent invention is challenging. Some tales speak of hidden treasures buried within the structures, leading to unauthorized excavations that have damaged several sites. Others describe the chambers as meeting places for secret societies or refuges for people fleeing religious persecution. While these stories are probably more fiction than fact, they reflect the enduring fascination these structures hold for local communities. Recent research has focused on trying to understand the chambers within their broader landscape context. Rather than studying individual structures in isolation, archaeologists are now mapping the distribution of chambers across entire watersheds and examining how they relate to other features of the historical and prehistoric landscape. This approach has revealed patterns that weren't apparent when looking at individual sites, suggesting that the chambers were indeed part of larger systems of land use and territorial organization. One particularly intriguing discovery has been the apparent relationship between some chambers and natural features that would have been significant to indigenous peoples. Several structures are positioned near springs, rock outcroppings, or viewpoints that hold special meaning in Native American traditions. This doesn't prove indigenous construction, but it does suggest that whoever built the chambers had intimate knowledge of the spiritual and practical significance of different locations. The ongoing mystery of the Putnam County stone chambers reflects broader questions about how we understand the past. Official histories often focus on documented events and material evidence that fits established narratives. But what about the knowledge and traditions that were never written down, the communities whose stories were lost or suppressed, the possibilities that don't fit neatly into our preconceptions about who was capable of what and when? Perhaps the most honest answer to the question of who built the stone chambers is that we simply don't know. They could be colonial root cellars, though their locations and construction suggest something more complex. They might be the work of pre-Columbian visitors, though the evidence for such contact remains controversial. They could have been built by indigenous peoples, though proving this remains challenging given the disruption of traditional knowledge systems. What we do know is that these humble stone structures continue to challenge our assumptions about the past. They remind us that even in landscapes we think we understand, mysteries can be hiding in plain sight. They suggest that the history of human activity in North America is far more complex and layered than simple narratives of European conquest and settlement would suggest. The stone chambers of Putnam County stand as silent witnesses to activities we can no longer fully comprehend. They've weathered centuries of seasonal change, survived the transformation of forest to farmland and back to forest again, and continued to puzzle each new generation of researchers who encounter them. In their stubborn persistence and their refusal to yield easy answers, they embody the very essence of historical mystery. The stone chambers of Putnam County are just the beginning of a much larger enigma that stretches across the entire Hudson Valley region. From the banks of the Hudson River to the foothills of the Berkshire Mountains, from the suburbs of New York City to the remote wilderness areas of the Adirondacks, hundreds of mysterious stone structures dot the landscape. These aren't the product of a single builder or even a single time period, but rather represent what appears to be a tradition of stone construction that spans centuries, possibly millennia. The Hudson Valley Stone Sites defy easy classification. Some are small chambers similar to those found in Putnam County. Others are massive stone walls that stretch for miles across ridgetops and through valleys. There are dolmens, table-like structures made of enormous stone slabs balanced on smaller supporting stones. There are cairns, carefully constructed piles of rocks that mark high points and trail intersections. And perhaps most intriguingly, there are petroglyphs, ancient rock carvings that seem to record symbols and images whose meanings have been lost to time. What makes these sites so puzzling isn't just their individual characteristics, but their sheer abundance and distribution. Researchers have documented over 1,000 stone structures across the Hudson Valley region, and new discoveries are made regularly as development and natural forces expose previously hidden sites. The density of these structures in some areas is remarkable, with dozens of chambers, walls, and other features concentrated within just a few square miles. The stone walls are perhaps the most visible and controversial of these structures. Unlike the property boundaries and field divisions built by colonial farmers, many of these walls seem to serve no obvious practical purpose. They run through dense forest where no farming ever took place, climb impossibly steep hillsides where livestock could never graze, and follow routes that make no sense from an agricultural perspective. Some walls are built with such massive stones that moving them would have required coordinated effort by large groups of people. One of the most famous of these mysterious walls runs along the ridge of the Ramapo Mountains, stretching for more than 10 miles through terrain that was never suitable for farming. The wall is built from enormous boulders, some weighing several tons, fitted together with remarkable precision. No mortar holds the stones in place, yet the wall remains largely intact after centuries of weathering. Local historians have struggled to explain its purpose, with theories ranging from property boundaries established by early Dutch settlers to defensive works built during the Revolutionary War. But the Ramapo Wall shows none of the characteristics of colonial construction. European settlers typically built walls using available fieldstones, clearing rocks from areas they wanted to farm and piling them along property lines. These walls were functional but not particularly sophisticated, built quickly and efficiently to serve immediate needs. The Ramapo Wall, by contrast, shows evidence of careful planning and sophisticated engineering. The stones are carefully selected and shaped, the foundation is expertly prepared, and the overall construction displays a level of skill that seems unnecessary for a simple property boundary. The dolmens scattered throughout the Hudson Valley present another puzzle. These structures consist of large, flat stones balanced on smaller supporting stones, creating table-like formations that are often found in ancient megalithic sites across Europe and other parts of the world. The Hudson Valley dolmens range from small, intimate structures that could serve as altars or ceremonial platforms to massive monuments that required coordinated effort by many people to construct. What makes the Hudson Valley dolmens particularly mysterious is their apparent age and distribution. While some show clear signs of recent construction or modification, others display weathering patterns and lichen growth that suggest considerable antiquity. They're not randomly distributed across the landscape, but seem to be positioned at significant locations, often on hilltops with commanding views or near water sources and natural landmarks. The most famous dolmen in the region sits atop a hill near North Salem, New York. Known locally as the Balanced Rock, this structure consists of a massive granite boulder, estimated to weigh around 90 tons, perched on 5 smaller supporting stones. The precise balance of the structure has led some to argue that it couldn't be natural, that the supporting stones must have been carefully positioned to create this remarkable formation. Others contend that glacial action could have created the arrangement, though the supporting stones show signs of deliberate shaping and positioning. Recent geological analysis of the balanced rock has only deepened the mystery. The main boulder is composed of granite that appears to be local to the area, but the supporting stones are made of different types of rock that may have originated elsewhere. This suggests that if the structure is artificial, its builders went a considerable effort to select and transport specific materials for the supporting elements while using a local boulder for the main component. Throughout the Hudson Valley, petroglyphs add another layer of mystery to the stone site puzzle. These rock carvings, found on cliff faces, boulders, and cave walls, depict a wide range of symbols and images. Some appear to be astronomical markers, aligning with the positions of the sun, moon, or stars at specific times of year. Others show what appear to be maps, with lines and symbols that might represent rivers, trails, or territorial boundaries. Still others depict human figures, animals, and abstract symbols, whose meanings remain completely unknown. The petroglyphs present particular challenges for researchers trying to understand the Hudson Valley stone sites. Unlike constructed features that can sometimes be dated through associated artifacts or construction techniques, rock carvings are notoriously difficult to date scientifically. The symbols themselves offer few clues about their age or origin, as similar motifs appear in rock art traditions around the world and across different time periods. Some of the most intriguing petroglyphs are found in Inwood Hill Park in Manhattan, where Native American rock carvings were documented by early European settlers, but have since been damaged or destroyed by urban development. The surviving carvings show a mix of clearly indigenous symbols and others that some researchers have claimed show European influence, though these interpretations remain highly controversial. The question of who created the Hudson Valley stone sites has generated decades of debate and speculation. The official archaeological position has generally been that most structures are the work of colonial-era European settlers, built for practical purposes like farming, property boundaries, and root storage. This explanation works for some sites, particularly those in areas with documented histories of European settlement and agriculture. But the colonial theory struggles to account for the full scope and complexity of the Hudson Valley stone phenomenon. Many sites are located in areas that were never farmed or settled by Europeans. Others display construction techniques and astronomical alignments that seem unnecessary for purely practical purposes. And the sheer number of structures suggests a building tradition that extended far beyond the immediate needs of colonial settlement. The indigenous theory has gained support from researchers who note similarities between Hudson Valley stone sites and documented Native American construction traditions. Archaeological evidence shows that indigenous peoples of the region had sophisticated knowledge of stone working and were capable of large-scale construction projects. The positioning of many sites near water sources, along traditional travel routes, and at locations with spiritual significance in Native American traditions supports the possibility of indigenous construction. Some researchers have suggested that the stone sites represent a continuous tradition of construction that spans the Pre-Columbian, Contact, and colonial periods. According to this theory, indigenous peoples began building stone structures thousands of years ago, continuing and adapting these traditions even after European contact. Some sites might have been built entirely by Native Americans. Others might represent collaborative efforts between indigenous and European communities, and still others might be European structures built on or near sites that held previous significance for indigenous peoples. The astronomical alignments found at many Hudson Valley stone sites add another dimension to the mystery. Researchers have documented chambers, walls, and petroglyphs that align with sunrise or sunset on the solstices and equinoxes, with the rising of specific stars or constellations, and with other celestial events. These alignments are found at sites throughout the region, suggesting that astronomical observation was an important factor in their construction and use. The Gunjiwamp site in nearby Connecticut provides a compelling example of astronomical alignment in stone construction. This complex of stone chambers and walls includes structures that precisely frame the sunrise on the winter solstice and the equinoxes. The alignments are so accurate that they can be used as calendars, marking the passage of seasons with remarkable precision. Similar alignments have been documented at Hudson Valley sites, though often with less precision due to damage or modification over time. The calendar stone chambers raise intriguing questions about the sophistication and purposes of their builders. Creating accurate astronomical alignments requires detailed observation of celestial movements over long periods of time. It also requires mathematical knowledge to translate these observations into architectural plans. Whether this knowledge came from indigenous astronomical traditions, European scientific learning, or some combination of both remains unclear. Recent research has begun to examine the Hudson Valley Stone Sites as part of broader cultural landscapes rather than isolated phenomena. This approach recognizes that the structures were built within existing systems of land use, territorial organization, and spiritual practice. Rather than trying to determine the age and origin of individual sites, researchers are now studying how the stone features relate to documented historical events, environmental changes, and cultural interactions in the region. This landscape approach has revealed patterns that weren't apparent when studying individual sites. Stone walls often follow natural features like ridgelines and watersheds, suggesting that they might have served as territorial boundaries or travel routes. Chambers and dolmens are frequently positioned at locations that would have been significant in both indigenous and European land use systems. Petroglyphs often appear at natural gathering places like caves, overhangs, and prominent rock formations. The distribution of stone sites also shows interesting correlations with documented historical events. Some clusters of structures appear to be associated with areas of intensive contact between indigenous and European communities. Others are found in regions that served as refuges during periods of conflict or displacement. A few seem to be related to specific historical events, like the construction of transportation routes or the establishment of religious communities. One of the most significant recent developments in Hudson Valley stone site research has been the application of new dating techniques and analytical methods. While direct dating of stone structures remains challenging, researchers have begun using innovative approaches to establish chronologies. These include analyzing sediments that have accumulated around structures, studying the growth patterns of lichens and other organisms on stone surfaces, and using ground-penetrating radar to examine the subsurface features of sites. These new methods are beginning to provide clearer pictures of when different sites were built and how they were used over time. Some structures that were assumed to be colonial era are showing evidence of much greater age. Others that appeared ancient are revealing signs of more recent construction or modification. The emerging timeline is far more complex than earlier researchers imagined, with evidence of construction activity spanning many centuries and possibly millennia. The Hudson Valley stone sites also raise important questions about cultural continuity and change in the region. Rather than representing a simple replacement of indigenous peoples by European colonists, the archaeological record suggests a much more complex process of interaction, adaptation, and cultural mixing. Some stone sites might represent attempts by indigenous communities to maintain traditional practices in the face of colonization. Others might show how European settlers adapted their building techniques to local conditions and materials. The preservation and study of Hudson Valley stone sites face significant challenges in the modern era. Urban and suburban development continues to threaten many sites, with structures being damaged or destroyed by construction activities. Private property restrictions limit access for researchers and make systematic study difficult. And the controversial nature of some theories about site origins has sometimes hindered serious archaeological investigation. Despite these challenges, interest in the Hudson Valley Stone Sites continues to grow. Amateur researchers and local history groups have documented hundreds of previously unknown structures. New analytical techniques are providing fresh insights into site origins and functions, and changing perspectives on indigenous history and cultural continuity are opening new avenues for understanding these mysterious structures. The Hudson Valley Stone Sites represent one of the most extensive and enigmatic archaeological puzzles in North America. They challenge simple narratives about the region's past and force us to consider the possibility that the landscape holds secrets we're only beginning to understand. Whether they were built by indigenous peoples maintaining ancient traditions, European colonists adapting to a new environment, or some combination of both, these structures stand as testament to human ingenuity and the enduring mystery of the past. In their silent persistence across the landscape, the stone sites of the Hudson Valley continue to pose questions that may never be fully answered. They remind us that even in one of the most densely populated and thoroughly documented regions of North America, mysteries can hide in plain sight, waiting for the next curious researcher or careful observer to uncover new clues about their origins and purposes. Deep in the forests and valleys of New York State, scattered across landscapes that most people pass by without a second thought, lie some of the most puzzling geological formations in North America. These aren't your typical rock outcroppings or natural stone formations. These are massive boulders, some weighing hundreds of tons, balanced in positions so precarious and seemingly impossible that they challenge everything we think we know about how nature works. They're called balanced rocks, and while geologists have explanations for how some of them came to be, there are others that defy conventional understanding. Some appear to have been placed with such precision that they seem almost engineered, positioned in ways that suggest not just the random forces of glaciers and erosion, but something far more deliberate, something that might just point to ancient human intervention thousands of years before recorded history. Let's start with one of the most famous examples, a massive granite boulder known locally as Balanced Rock, located in the town of Lanesboro, just across the border in Massachusetts, but part of the same geological system that extends throughout the Berkshire Mountains of western New York. This colossal stone weighs an estimated 165 tons and sits perched on a small rocky outcrop, appearing to balance on just a few contact points. The site is so striking that it's become a local landmark, drawing visitors who stand beneath it in amazement, wondering how such a massive object could remain stable for what must be thousands of years. But Balanced Rock is just one example. Throughout the Hudson Valley, the Adirondacks, and the Finger Lakes region, similar formations dot the landscape. Some are hidden deep in forests, known only to hikers who stumble upon them by chance. Others sit in plain view along roadsides or in farmers' fields, massive granite and limestone boulders that seem to defy gravity itself. The conventional explanation for these formations centers around the last ice age, which ended roughly 12,000 years ago. During this period, massive glaciers advanced and retreated across New York State multiple times, carrying enormous boulders along with them. These glacial erratics, as geologists call them, were transported sometimes hundreds of miles from their original locations before being deposited when the ice finally melted. The theory suggests that as glaciers retreated, they left behind these massive stones in whatever position they happened to settle. Some landed on flat ground, others rolled into valleys, and a few, through pure chance, ended up balanced on smaller rocks or outcroppings in seemingly impossible positions. The ice, according to this explanation, acted like a massive crane, lowering these boulders into place with a precision that only appears deliberate. But here's where the mystery deepens. Many of these balanced rocks show characteristics that don't quite fit the glacial erratic theory. Some appear to have been positioned with an understanding of engineering principles that shouldn't have existed when they were supposedly placed. Others show signs of having been adjusted or modified after their initial placement, with smaller stones wedged underneath them or support structures that seem too precise to be natural. Take, for example, the mysterious balanced boulder found in the Shawangunk Mountains near New Paltz. This massive stone, weighing an estimated 80 tons, sits balanced on 3 small contact points on a flat bedrock surface. What makes this formation particularly puzzling is that the supporting bedrock shows clear signs of having been modified. Small channels have been carved into the rock, creating drainage systems that prevent water from pooling around the support points. These modifications appear deliberate, designed to prevent the kind of erosion that would eventually destabilize the balanced stone. If glaciers were responsible for placing this boulder, how do we explain these modifications? Glacial ice doesn't carve precise drainage channels. It doesn't create carefully engineered support systems. Yet here they are, suggesting that someone, at some point in the distant past, took great care to ensure this massive stone would remain balanced for thousands of years. Similar evidence of modification can be found at other balanced rock sites throughout New York. Near the town of Ithaca, a balanced boulder known locally as the Balancing Act shows clear signs of having smaller stones carefully placed beneath it, creating a stable 3-point support system. The positioning of these support stones is so precise that it's difficult to believe it happened by chance. Even more intriguing are the patterns that emerge when you look at these formations collectively. Many of the balanced rocks in New York appear to be positioned along ancient travel routes, particularly trails that follow ridge lines and river valleys. Some researchers have suggested that these massive stones might have served as landmarks or navigation aids for ancient peoples, carefully positioned and maintained to guide travelers through the wilderness. This theory gains credibility when you consider the sophisticated knowledge of astronomy and engineering that we now know ancient peoples possessed. From Stonehenge to the pyramids of Egypt, archaeological evidence shows that our ancestors were capable of moving and positioning massive stones with remarkable precision. If they could transport and arrange the trilithons at Stonehenge, each weighing over 40 tons, could they have also positioned much larger boulders as landmark navigation systems? The idea becomes even more compelling when you examine the relationship between balanced rocks and other ancient sites in New York. Many of these formations are located near areas where Native American artifacts have been found, including stone tools, pottery fragments, and evidence of seasonal camps. Some balanced rocks sit adjacent to what appear to be ancient stone circles or ceremonial sites, suggesting they may have played a role in spiritual or religious practices. One particularly fascinating example can be found in the Finger Lakes region, where a balanced boulder sits at the center of what appears to be a carefully constructed stone circle. The boulder, weighing roughly 50 tons, is positioned so that it casts specific shadows at different times of the year, potentially serving as a kind of ancient sundial or calendar system. The precision required to position such a massive stone to achieve these effects suggests a level of planning and engineering that goes far beyond random glacial placement. But perhaps the most compelling evidence for ancient human intervention comes from the balanced rocks themselves. Many show clear signs of tool marks, areas where the stone appears to have been shaped or modified using primitive tools. These modifications aren't random chips or natural weathering patterns. They're deliberate alterations, designed to change the balance point or create specific contact surfaces. Near the town of Cooperstown, a balanced granite boulder shows unmistakable evidence of having been worked with stone tools. One side of the boulder has been flattened, creating a stable base, while the opposite side has been carefully shaped to create the precise curve needed to balance on a much smaller supporting stone. The level of skill required to make these modifications while working with such a massive object suggests not just accidental discovery, but deliberate engineering. These tool marks raise fascinating questions about the people who might have created these formations. If ancient humans were responsible for positioning and modifying these balanced rocks, they would have needed not just the tools and techniques to move massive stones, but also a sophisticated understanding of leverage, balance, and structural engineering. Some researchers have suggested that these formations might be the work of the same ancient peoples who built other megalithic structures around the world. The techniques required to balance a 100-ton boulder are remarkably similar to those needed to construct stone circles, dolmens, and other ancient monuments. The precision, the understanding of physics, and the sheer ambition required all point to a level of sophistication that challenges our assumptions about ancient peoples. There's also the question of purpose. If these balanced rocks were deliberately positioned by ancient humans, why? What drove people to expend the enormous effort required to move and balance such massive stones? Some theories suggest they served practical purposes as landmarks or navigation aids. Others propose they had spiritual or ceremonial significance, perhaps serving as focal points for religious gatherings or astronomical observations. The astronomical connection is particularly intriguing. Many balanced rocks in New York are positioned in ways that align with significant celestial events. Some point toward the rising sun on the summer solstice, others toward specific star formations that would have been important to ancient peoples. This suggests that whoever positioned these stones had not just the engineering skills to move them, but also the astronomical knowledge to align them with cosmic events. Yet for all the evidence suggesting human intervention, the glacial erratic theory persists. Mainstream geology maintains that these formations are natural, the result of glacial action and millions of years of gradual erosion and weathering. They point to the fact that similar balanced rocks can be found in other glaciated regions around the world, suggesting that the phenomenon is entirely natural. But this explanation struggles to account for the precision of many formations, the evidence of deliberate modification, and the patterns that emerge when looking at multiple sites. While some balanced rocks may indeed be natural glacial erratics, others show clear signs of human intervention that can't be easily dismissed. The mystery deepens when you consider the timeline. If these formations were created by ancient humans, when did this happen? The balanced rocks show no signs of recent disturbance, suggesting they've been in their current positions for thousands of years. This would place their creation in the distant past, potentially during or shortly after the last ice age, when the landscape was very different from what we see today. This timeline coincides with a period of significant climate change and human migration in North America. As the glaciers retreated, new lands became available for habitation, and human populations began to spread across the continent. It's possible that these early peoples developed sophisticated techniques for working with the massive boulders left behind by the retreating ice, using them to create navigation systems, ceremonial sites, or astronomical observatories. The balanced rocks of New York remain one of the state's most enduring mysteries. Whether they're natural formations created by glacial action or deliberate constructions by ancient peoples, they represent a fascinating glimpse into the forces that shaped the landscape thousands of years ago. Each balanced boulder tells a story, whether of ice and stone or human ingenuity and ambition. What makes these formations particularly compelling is that they're still there, still balanced, still defying easy explanation. In an age where we can explain most natural phenomena, these massive stones continue to challenge our understanding, reminding us that there are still mysteries waiting to be solved, still questions about our past that remain unanswered. Hidden in the forests and rocky outcrops of New York's Hudson Valley lies a collection of ancient messages carved in stone. These petroglyphs, some dating back thousands of years, represent one of the most significant concentrations of Native American rock art in the northeastern United States. Yet despite decades of study and documentation, many of these mysterious symbols continue to baffle archaeologists, linguists, and tribal elders alike. Unlike the more famous rock art of the American Southwest, the petroglyphs of the Hudson Valley were created in a landscape of dense forests and steep river valleys, carved into the schist and granite faces of glacially carved outcrops. These aren't simple pictographs depicting hunting scenes or daily life. Many are complex symbolic systems that seem to encode information in ways we're only beginning to understand. The story of these petroglyphs begins not with their creation, but with their rediscovery. For centuries, they remained hidden beneath layers of lichen and moss, forgotten as the Native American populations who created them were displaced or decimated by disease and warfare. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that researchers began to systematically document and study these ancient carvings, revealing a rich tapestry of symbolic communication that spans thousands of years. One of the most significant sites is located near the town of Inwood, where a large schist outcrop contains over 200 individual petroglyphs. The carvings range from simple geometric patterns to complex symbolic arrangements that seem to tell stories or encode specific information. Some depict recognizable forms, human figures, animals, and celestial objects. Others are purely abstract, consisting of circles, lines, and geometric shapes arranged in patterns that suggest meaning but resist interpretation. What makes these petroglyphs particularly mysterious is their diversity. Rather than representing a single artistic tradition or cultural group, they appear to span multiple time periods and possibly multiple cultures. Some carvings show the weathering and patination that comes with great age, suggesting they were created thousands of years ago. Others appear much more recent, possibly carved within the last few centuries. This temporal layering creates a fascinating archaeological puzzle. The Hudson Valley was home to various Native American groups over thousands of years, including the Lenape, Mohican, and Wappinger peoples. Each group had its own cultural traditions, spiritual beliefs, and artistic styles. The petroglyphs appear to represent a kind of ongoing conversation in stone, with different groups adding their own symbols and messages to sites that were already considered sacred or significant. The technique used to create these carvings provides additional clues about their origins and meaning. Most were created using a method called pecking, where harder stones were used to repeatedly strike the rock surface, gradually wearing away the stone to create the desired image. This technique requires considerable time and effort, suggesting that the creation of these petroglyphs was a deliberate and significant act, not casual graffiti or idle artistic expression. The depth and precision of many carvings also indicates that they were meant to last. The artists weren't creating temporary marks but permanent messages intended to endure for generations. This permanence suggests that the petroglyphs served important functions in Native American culture, possibly as territorial markers, spiritual sites, or repositories of important cultural information. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Hudson Valley petroglyphs is the presence of symbols that don't match any known Native American artistic traditions. Some researchers have identified carvings that appear to use writing systems or symbolic conventions that are completely unknown. These anomalous symbols have sparked considerable debate about who created them and what they might mean. Near the town of Cold Spring, a series of petroglyphs includes symbols that some researchers believe represent an ancient writing system. The carvings consist of geometric shapes arranged in linear patterns that suggest they might encode linguistic information, rather than simply depicting objects or concepts. If true, this would represent one of the earliest known examples of written communication in North America, predating European contact by centuries or even millennia. The challenge in interpreting these symbols lies partly in the loss of cultural knowledge. Many Native American oral traditions that might have preserved the meaning of these petroglyphs were disrupted or lost during the colonial period. Tribal elders today often recognize the general significance of the sites, but lack specific knowledge about what individual symbols might mean. This knowledge gap has created space for alternative theories about the petroglyphs' origins and meaning. Some researchers have suggested that certain symbols might represent contact with other cultures, possibly European or even pre-Columbian visitors to North America. Others have proposed that some petroglyphs might encode astronomical information, serving as ancient calendars or star maps. The astronomical theory gains credibility when you examine the positioning and orientation of many petroglyph sites. Several major locations in the Hudson Valley are positioned in ways that align with significant celestial events. Some face east toward the sunrise. Others are oriented toward specific star formations that would have been important in Native American astronomy. Near the town of Beacon, a petroglyph site includes carvings that appear to map constellations visible in the northern sky. The arrangement of symbols matches the positions of major stars in Ursa Major and other circumpolar constellations, suggesting that the petroglyphs might have served as a kind of star chart or astronomical teaching tool. This astronomical connection becomes even more intriguing when you consider the sophisticated understanding of celestial cycles that many Native American cultures possessed. From the medicine wheels of the Great Plains to the astronomical alignments of ancient pueblos in the Southwest, indigenous peoples across North America developed complex systems for tracking and predicting celestial events. The Hudson Valley Petroglyphs might represent a northeastern version of this astronomical tradition, using rock art to encode information about seasonal cycles, lunar phases, and the movements of planets and stars. If so, they would represent not just artistic expression, but also scientific observation and mathematical calculation carried out by indigenous astronomers thousands of years ago. But the mystery of these petroglyphs extends beyond their potential astronomical significance. Many sites include symbols that seem to represent maps or geographical information. Some researchers have identified petroglyphs that appear to show river systems, mountain ranges, and other geographical features of the Hudson Valley region. One particularly fascinating example can be found near the town of Newburgh, where a series of connected lines and symbols appears to map the course of the Hudson River and its major tributaries. The accuracy of this apparent map is remarkable, showing not just the general flow of the river, but also the locations of major rapids, islands, and confluences with smaller streams. If these interpretations are correct, the petroglyphs would represent some of the earliest known maps of the Hudson Valley, created by people with intimate knowledge of the landscape and its features. This would suggest that the site served practical functions as well as spiritual ones, providing navigational information for travelers and traders moving through the region. The variety of symbols found in Hudson Valley petroglyphs also suggests they might have served multiple functions simultaneously. Some appear to be territorial markers, identifying the lands of specific clans or tribes. Others seem to commemorate important events or individuals. Still others might represent spiritual or religious concepts, serving as focal points for ceremonies or vision quests. This multiplicity of function is consistent with what we know about Native American approaches to sacred sites. Unlike European traditions that tend to compartmentalize different aspects of life, many indigenous cultures integrated practical, spiritual, and social functions in their sacred places. A single site might serve as a territorial marker, astronomical observatory, ceremonial center, and repository of cultural knowledge all at the same time. The petroglyphs also reveal interesting patterns in their distribution across the landscape. Rather than being randomly scattered, they tend to cluster in specific types of locations. Many are found near water sources, particularly at places where streams flow into the Hudson River. Others are located on high ridges with commanding views of the surrounding landscape. This positioning suggests that the petroglyphs were part of a larger system of landscape use and cultural meaning. They mark places that were already significant in Native American culture, locations that served as gathering places, seasonal camps, or important points along travel routes. The mystery deepens when you consider that some petroglyphs appear to have been deliberately obscured or modified over time. Later carvings sometimes overlay earlier ones, and some symbols appear to have been intentionally defaced or altered. This suggests that the meaning and significance of these sites changed over time, possibly as different cultural groups gained control of the region or as spiritual beliefs evolved. Near the town of Poughkeepsie, researchers have identified a petroglyph site where multiple layers of carving are clearly visible. The earliest symbols appear to date back several thousand years and include simple geometric patterns and animal figures. Later additions include more complex symbolic arrangements and what appear to be human figures engaged in ceremonial activities. The most recent carvings at this site include symbols that some researchers believe represent contact with European colonists. These later additions suggest that Native American artists continued to use traditional petroglyph sites well into the historical period, adapting ancient traditions to record new experiences and changing circumstances. This continuity of use over thousands of years makes the Hudson Valley petroglyphs particularly valuable as historical documents. They represent an unbroken chain of cultural expression and communication that spans the entire period of human habitation in the region. Each symbol adds to the story, creating a complex narrative written in stone. Yet for all their historical significance, many of these petroglyphs remain as mysterious today as when they were first rediscovered. The symbols resist easy interpretation, their meanings locked away with the cultures that created them. Some may encode information that we simply don't have the cultural context to understand. Others might represent concepts or beliefs that don't translate easily into modern ways of thinking. The challenge of interpretation is compounded by the fact that many petroglyph sites have been damaged or destroyed over the years. Urban development, quarrying, and natural erosion have claimed numerous sites, taking their secrets with them. Those that remain are increasingly threatened by pollution, vandalism, and the simple passage of time. Efforts to preserve and study the remaining petroglyphs have intensified in recent years, with archaeologists, tribal representatives, and local communities working together to document and protect these ancient messages. New technologies, including three-dimensional scanning and digital imaging, are revealing details that were previously invisible, offering hope that some of the mysteries might yet be solved. But perhaps the most important aspect of the Hudson Valley petroglyphs isn't their specific meaning, but their existence as a testament to the sophistication and cultural richness of the Native American peoples who created them. These aren't the simple scratches of primitive hunter-gatherers, but complex symbolic systems created by people with deep knowledge of their environment, sophisticated spiritual beliefs, and the technical skill to preserve their thoughts and observations in stone. The petroglyphs remind us that the Hudson Valley has been home to human culture for thousands of years, that the landscapes we see today have been shaped not just by natural forces, but by generations of people who knew these places intimately and found them worthy of permanent commemoration. In their mysterious symbols, we catch glimpses of worldviews and ways of understanding that are both alien and deeply familiar, separated from us by time, but connected through the shared human impulse to leave our mark on the world around us. Deep in the forests of New York, hidden beneath decades of fallen leaves and forgotten by time, lie structures that shouldn't exist. Found dotted throughout the countryside of Putnam County, New York, as well as in some areas of Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Vermont, are over 200 mysterious man-made stone chambers with origins shrouded in the fog of history. These aren't the rough cellars you might expect from colonial farmers. These are something far more sophisticated, far more mysterious. Picture this. You're hiking through a seemingly ordinary patch of woodland when you stumble upon what looks like an entrance to another world. A low stone doorway, barely tall enough for a person to enter, leads into darkness. The walls are made of carefully fitted stones, assembled without a single drop of mortar, yet they've stood for centuries. The most elaborate are described as beehive chambers, indicative of the conical shape in the central room, supported by a large ceiling capstone. These structures seem to defy everything we think we know about early American history. The chambers vary in design, but they share common features that set them apart from typical colonial construction. Many have that distinctive beehive shape, with walls that curve inward toward the ceiling like the inside of an ancient tomb. Some are circular, others rectangular, but all share that same precise stonework that speaks of master builders. These sophisticated structures sometimes feature smoke holes to ventilate the chambers, as well as shelves, benches, or recesses incorporated into the design with deliberate purpose. But here's where things get truly puzzling. These aren't just storage spaces or simple shelters. Many of the chambers contain something far more intriguing: petroglyphs, ancient symbols carved into the stone walls, images that seem to tell a story we can no longer read. Animals, geometric patterns, humanoid figures, all etched with deliberate care into the chamber walls. Some researchers believe these images aren't just decorative. They think they might be maps, calendars, or records of celestial events. The astronomical connections are perhaps the most compelling aspect of these mysterious structures. Believers in the ancient theory say that the chambers and rock formations were utilized collectively as some religious ceremonial center, as well as a celestial and astronomical observatory. When researchers began studying the alignment of these chambers, they discovered something remarkable. Many of them are positioned to frame specific astronomical events. Doorways that perfectly capture the winter solstice sunrise, windows that align with the summer solstice sunset, openings that track the movement of certain stars throughout the year. One site in particular has captured the attention of researchers. There were 24 different star alignments. "I don't think they're coincidental," Dennis told me. "You can only have so many before it becomes something you have to assume was set up deliberately." 24 different alignments. That's not accident. That's intention. That's knowledge of astronomy that suggests these builders understood the movements of the heavens in ways that challenge our assumptions about early American inhabitants. But who built them? This is where the mystery deepens into something truly puzzling. The conventional explanation points to colonial settlers, perhaps using these chambers as root cellars or storage spaces. But there are problems with this theory. The construction technique, for one. The precise stonework, the astronomical alignments, the sophisticated ventilation systems. None of this matches typical colonial building methods. Colonial farmers built practical structures, not observatories. Some researchers have proposed a different origin entirely. They suggest these chambers predate European colonization by centuries, possibly millennia. Could they have been built by indigenous peoples? The petroglyphs certainly support this theory. Many of the symbols carved into the chamber walls resemble known Native American pictographs. The astronomical alignments, too, fit with indigenous traditions of tracking celestial cycles for agricultural and ceremonial purposes. The 100-acre Gunjuam archaeological site in Groton Con contains such stone structures as beehive chambers, petroglyphs, a double circle of stones, cellars, and walls. All date back hundreds of years. Some of the structures are thought to be Native American and perhaps had ceremonial functions. But even this explanation raises questions. The level of stonework in these chambers goes beyond what we typically associate with indigenous building traditions in this region. The massive capstones, some weighing several tons, would have required sophisticated engineering techniques to position. Then there's the distribution pattern. These chambers aren't randomly scattered across the landscape. They follow specific geographical features, often built into hillsides that provide natural protection and strategic views of the surrounding area. Some are connected by ancient pathways that seem to link chamber to chamber across vast distances. It's as if they were part of a larger network, a system of connected sites serving some greater purpose we can no longer comprehend. The most intriguing chambers contain what researchers call calendar stones. These are flat stones with carefully carved lines, circles, and notches that seem to track the passage of time in ways more sophisticated than simple day counting. Some appear to predict eclipses. Others track the complex cycles of the moon. One chamber contains a stone that perfectly predicts the return of Halley's Comet, though it was carved centuries before the comet's orbital period was understood by European astronomy. Archaeological dating of these sites has proven frustratingly inconclusive. Organic materials that could provide carbon dating are rare in the chambers themselves. What evidence exists suggests ages ranging from a few hundred to several thousand years, but the techniques used in their construction could theoretically place them much older. Some researchers have proposed that these chambers represent a lost chapter in American prehistory, evidence of an advanced culture that flourished long before recorded history. The chambers also display features that seem to serve no practical purpose, at least none that we can identify. Strange alcoves carved at precise angles, stone shelves positioned to catch light from specific astronomical events, acoustic properties that amplify whispers while muffling louder sounds. These aren't features you'd expect in a simple storage cellar. They're the kind of details you'd find in a temple, an observatory, or some other structure designed for ceremonial purposes. Some of the most mysterious chambers contain what appear to be offering stones, flat surfaces with carefully carved depressions that seem designed to hold liquids or small objects. The positioning of these stones, always in relation to the chamber's astronomical alignments, suggests they played a role in ceremonies timed to celestial events. But what kind of ceremonies? What were these people observing? And why was it important enough to justify the enormous effort required to build these structures? The preservation of these chambers adds another layer to the mystery. Many have survived centuries of harsh northeastern winters, their mortarless construction somehow weathering freeze-thaw cycles that destroy modern buildings. The techniques used to achieve this durability seem to come from a sophisticated understanding of engineering principles that we're only beginning to appreciate. Each stone was selected and shaped to fit perfectly with its neighbors, creating structures that are actually strengthened by the stresses that would destroy conventional masonry. Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys have revealed that many of these sites are more extensive than originally thought. What appears to be a single chamber from the surface often turns out to be part of a larger underground complex, with connecting passages and additional rooms extending deep into the earth. Some of these underground networks span several acres, suggesting construction projects that would have required enormous coordination and labor. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of these chambers is how many remain undiscovered. These Putnam County stone chambers have riddled historians for years. Were they root cellars, religious and ceremonial temples, or are they even supernatural in nature? Every year, hikers and researchers discover new chambers, each adding to the growing catalog of these mysterious structures. If 200 have been found so far, how many more lie hidden beneath the forest floor, their secrets locked away in stone? The chambers force us to reconsider what we think we know about the ancient history of New York. They suggest a level of astronomical knowledge, engineering skill, and organized construction that doesn't fit our standard narrative of pre-Columbian North America. Whether built by indigenous peoples with knowledge systems we've underestimated, by unknown prehistoric cultures, or by some other group entirely, these underground stone chambers represent one of the most compelling archaeological mysteries on the continent. And they're still out there, waiting in the woods, holding their secrets in chambers of carefully fitted stone, aligned with stars whose movements they've been tracking for centuries. Wander through the forests of New York, and you'll encounter something that seems oddly out of place among the trees. Stone walls, miles and miles of them, running through deep woods where no houses stand, where no fields have been cleared for generations. Walk into a patch of forest in New England and chances are you will, almost literally, stumble across a stone wall. These aren't the neat property boundaries you might expect from colonial farming. These walls follow patterns that defy conventional explanation, creating networks that stretch across the landscape in ways that challenge everything we think we know about early American land use. The scope of these stone wall networks is staggering. We're not talking about a few isolated structures here and there. We're talking about thousands of miles of carefully constructed stone walls crisscrossing New York and the broader Northeast region. There are thousands of miles of stone walls across New England, mostly built in the 1800s. But here's the thing that puzzles researchers. Many of these walls don't follow the logical patterns you'd expect from agricultural boundaries. Traditional farming walls have a predictable logic. They separate fields, contain livestock, and follow property lines. They connect to barns, farmhouses, and other agricultural structures in ways that make practical sense. But the mysterious walls of New York follow different rules entirely. They run up impossible steep slopes where no farmer would ever try to clear land. They traverse swamps and rocky outcroppings that would be useless for agriculture. They form geometric patterns that seem to serve no agricultural purpose whatsoever. Some of these walls are massive constructions that would have required enormous effort to build. We're talking about walls 6 feet high and 3 feet thick, built from stones that weigh hundreds of pounds each. The amount of labor required to quarry, transport, and precisely position these stones would have been enormous. Yet many of these most impressive walls are found in locations where no colonial settlement ever existed, far from any historical farmstead or village. The construction techniques used in these walls also raise questions. The stones in New England stone walls were plucked from bedrock by the Laurentide ice sheet between about 30,000 and 15,000 years ago. While it's true that glacial activity provided an abundance of building material, the way these stones were selected and fitted together suggests knowledge and skill that goes beyond simple field clearing. Many of these mysterious walls display sophisticated dry stone masonry techniques. The stones are carefully shaped and fitted together without mortar, creating structures that have survived centuries of weather and geological settling. The largest stones, some weighing several tons, are positioned as foundation stones with smaller stones fitted above them in precise patterns that distribute weight and provide stability. This isn't the kind of work you'd expect from farmers, simply trying to clear rocks from their fields. But here's where things get really puzzling. When researchers began mapping these wall networks using aerial photography and ground surveys, they discovered patterns that seemed too complex and too purposeful to be explained by agricultural needs alone. Some walls form perfect circles, others create intricate geometric designs. Some appear to be aligned with astronomical phenomena, running in directions that correspond to solstice sunrise and sunset points. One of the most mysterious aspects of these walls is how they interact with the natural landscape. Rather than simply imposing human geometry on the terrain, many seem to follow subtle contours and natural features in ways that enhance rather than disrupt the landscape's natural flow. They curve around significant trees, incorporate natural rock outcroppings into their design, and follow ridge lines and watershed boundaries with an understanding of the land that suggests intimate, long-term familiarity. Archaeological investigation of these sites has yielded frustratingly few answers. Unlike typical colonial stone walls, which often contain artifacts like pottery shards, metal tools, or other debris from daily life, many of the mysterious walls contain no datable material at all. The stones themselves provide no clues to their age beyond their weathering patterns, which can vary dramatically based on local conditions. Some researchers have proposed that these walls represent a different kind of land use entirely, one that predates European colonization. Could they have been built by indigenous peoples as territorial markers, ceremonial boundaries, or hunting structures? The idea isn't as far-fetched as it might initially seem. Many indigenous cultures throughout North America built extensive stone structures, and the techniques used in these walls are consistent with traditional dry stone masonry found in various Native American sites. The astronomical alignments found in some wall networks add another layer to the mystery. Just as with the underground chambers, many of these walls seem to be positioned to mark significant celestial events. Some researchers have documented walls that perfectly frame the rising sun on the winter solstice, others that align with specific star positions. These alignments suggest the builders had sophisticated astronomical knowledge and considered celestial cycles important enough to incorporate into their construction planning. But the most puzzling aspect of these stone wall networks might be their sheer scope and apparent coordination. We're not talking about isolated projects here. These walls span hundreds of square miles, crossing multiple watersheds and geographic regions. The level of planning and coordination required to create such extensive networks suggests social organization on a scale that doesn't match our understanding of pre-Columbian cultures in this region. Some walls appear to be connected across vast distances, forming networks that could have served as communication systems or territorial markers for large-scale societies. Imagine standing on a hilltop and being able to follow a stone wall with your eyes as it runs ridge to ridge across the landscape, connecting distant points in a pattern too complex to be accidental. That's what researchers have documented in multiple locations throughout New York. The preservation of these walls adds another mystery. While some walls were built intentionally to section off farmland, some simply served as a quick solution to all the stone farmers encountered while tilling the fields. But the mysterious walls show evidence of much more sophisticated construction techniques than simple field clearing would require. Many have survived centuries of harsh weather, their mortarless construction somehow maintaining structural integrity despite freeze-thaw cycles that would destroy conventional masonry. Recent studies using ground-penetrating radar and other advanced archaeological techniques have revealed that many of these wall systems are even more extensive than previously thought. What appears to be a single wall running through the forest often turns out to be part of a larger complex of interconnected structures, some extending underground or incorporating natural features in ways that aren't visible from surface observation. The most intriguing discoveries have come from sites where these mysterious walls intersect with other unexplained archaeological features. Some connect directly to the underground chambers we discussed earlier. Others incorporate standing stones, stone circles, or other megalithic features that seem to serve ceremonial or astronomical purposes. These intersections suggest that the walls weren't isolated projects, but part of larger, coordinated landscape modifications. Carbon dating of organic material found in association with some walls has yielded dates ranging from a few hundred to several thousand years old, but these dates are controversial and difficult to interpret. The walls themselves could be much older than any associated organic material, or they could have been built at different times by different groups using similar techniques. One particularly mysterious aspect of these walls is how they seem to incorporate knowledge of underground water sources and geological features. Many follow the exact boundaries of underground aquifers or run along geological fault lines in ways that suggest the builders had sophisticated understanding of subsurface conditions. This kind of knowledge would have required generations of careful observation and accumulated wisdom about the landscape. The walls also display features that seem to serve purposes beyond simple boundary marking. Some incorporate what appear to be observation platforms, carefully constructed stone platforms positioned at strategic high points along the wall roots. Others include carefully engineered water management features, directing runoff and preventing erosion in ways that suggest long-term planning for maintenance and preservation. Some of the most mysterious walls contain what researchers call spirit holes, deliberate gaps in the construction that serve no obvious practical purpose. These gaps are too regular and too carefully positioned to be accidental, suggesting they served some ceremonial or symbolic function that we can no longer understand. The positioning of these gaps often corresponds to astronomical alignments or natural features in ways that suggest deliberate intent. The network effect of these walls becomes even more apparent when viewed from aerial perspectives or satellite imagery. What looks like random stone constructions from ground level reveals itself as part of vast geometric patterns when seen from above. Some form spirals, others create grid patterns, and still others follow organic curves that seem to enhance rather than impose upon the natural landscape. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of these mysterious stone walls is how many remain undocumented and unstudied. Every year, researchers discover new sections of ancient walls deep in forests where no colonial settlement ever existed. If thousands of miles have been documented so far, how many more miles lie hidden beneath centuries of forest growth, their patterns and purposes lost to time? These stone walls force us to reconsider our assumptions about the ancient landscape of New York. They suggest large-scale construction projects carried out by peoples with sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, geology, and engineering. Whether built by indigenous cultures with capabilities we've underestimated, by unknown prehistoric societies, or by some other group entirely, these mysterious stone wall networks represent one of the most extensive archaeological puzzles in North America. And they're still out there, running through forests and over hills, marking boundaries we can no longer read, following patterns whose meaning has been lost to time. Silent testimony to human activity that predates our written records, these walls continue to challenge our understanding of who lived in this land and what they were capable of achieving. Hidden across the landscape of New York State lie ancient stone structures that seem to whisper secrets from a forgotten past. These aren't the grand pyramids of Egypt or the towering megaliths of Stonehenge, but something far more subtle and perhaps even more mysterious. Scattered throughout the Hudson Valley and the broader Northeast region, dozens of stone chambers, walls, and circular formations have been discovered, each one seemingly positioned with deliberate precision to track the movements of celestial bodies overhead. But here's what makes these discoveries so puzzling. Most archaeologists will tell you these structures were built by early European colonists, simple root cellars and farm walls from the 1700s and 1800s. Yet when researchers began studying their astronomical alignments, they discovered something remarkable. Many of these stone chambers are oriented with mathematical precision toward specific points on the horizon where the sun, moon, and stars rise, and set during crucial times of the year. Take the stone chambers found throughout Putnam County, New York. These mysterious underground rooms built from carefully fitted stone blocks seem unremarkable at first glance, but step inside during the winter solstice and something extraordinary happens. As the sun reaches its lowest point in the sky, its rays penetrate through precisely positioned openings in the stone walls, illuminating the inner chambers with golden light. This isn't coincidence. The odds of random construction creating such perfect alignments are astronomically small. The phenomenon becomes even more intriguing when you examine the broader pattern. Researchers have identified over 300 stone structures across the Hudson Valley alone, many of them displaying similar astronomical orientations. Some face the point where the sun rises on the summer solstice. Others are aligned with the winter solstice sunset. Still others track the equinoxes, those 2 days each year when day and night are perfectly balanced. But it's not just the sun these ancient builders were tracking. Some of the most remarkable alignments point toward specific star formations. In Westchester County, archaeoastronomer Byron Dix discovered stone chambers that perfectly frame the rise of the Pleiades star cluster, also known as the Seven Sisters. This particular constellation held deep significance for many ancient cultures around the world, often marking important agricultural seasons or spiritual observances. The precision of these alignments is staggering. When Dix and his colleague Jim Maver calculated the mathematical probability of these orientations occurring by chance, they found the odds to be virtually impossible. We're talking about structures that had to be positioned within degrees of accuracy to achieve their astronomical functions. This level of precision suggests not just astronomical knowledge, but sophisticated surveying techniques and mathematical understanding. What makes this even more mysterious is the age of some of these structures. While mainstream archaeology dates most of them to the colonial period, some researchers argue for a much older origin. Carbon dating of organic materials found within certain chambers has yielded dates as old as 600 AD, well before any known European presence in the region. If these dates are accurate, it would mean that someone with advanced astronomical knowledge was building precise celestial observatories in New York over 1,000 years before Columbus set foot in the Americas. The indigenous peoples of the region, including the Algonquin and Iroquois nations, certainly possessed sophisticated astronomical knowledge. Native American cultures across North America built medicine wheels and other stone structures aligned with celestial events. These circular formations of stones, with spokes radiating from a central hub, often tracked the movements of stars and planets with remarkable accuracy. Could the Stone Chambers of New York be a regional variation of this ancient practice? But there's another layer to this mystery that challenges our understanding even further. Some of the astronomical alignments found in New York stone structures don't match the current positions of celestial bodies. Instead, they seem calibrated for the sky as it appeared thousands of years ago. This is due to a phenomenon called precession, where Earth's axis slowly wobbles over a cycle of roughly 26,000 years, causing the positions of stars to shift gradually over time. If these structures were indeed aligned with ancient star positions, it would push their construction date back not centuries, but millennia. Imagine ancient astronomers, working with stone tools and perhaps crude instruments, calculating the precise movements of stars across vast periods of time. The knowledge required for such calculations rivals that of modern astronomy. The mystery deepens when you consider the broader context of these alignments. Similar astronomical orientations have been found in stone structures across New England, from Connecticut to Maine. This suggests not isolated instances of ancient knowledge, but a widespread tradition of celestial observation and monument building. Someone, or some group of people, was systematically creating astronomical observatories across a vast region. One of the most intriguing sites is located in Salem, New Hampshire, just across the border from New York. Known as America's Stonehenge, this complex of stone chambers, walls, and standing stones displays multiple astronomical alignments. The site's main chamber is oriented toward the winter solstice sunrise, while various stone formations mark the positions where the sun and moon rise and set throughout the year. Like a prehistoric calendar carved in stone, the site could have been used to track the passage of seasons and predict important celestial events. The construction techniques used at these sites also raise questions about their builders' capabilities. Many of the stone chambers feature sophisticated dry stone masonry, where massive blocks are fitted together without mortar yet remain stable for centuries. Some stones weigh several tons and would have required considerable engineering skill to position accurately. The precision of the fits between stones rivals that found in ancient megalithic sites around the world. Even more puzzling are the acoustic properties some of these chambers possess. Researchers have discovered that certain stone chambers act as acoustic resonators, amplifying sounds in specific frequency ranges. Could these chambers have been designed not just for astronomical observation, but also for ritual or ceremonial purposes involving sound and music? The combination of celestial alignment and acoustic engineering suggests a level of sophistication that challenges conventional timelines of technological development in the region. The alignments aren't limited to solar and stellar observations either. Some structures appear to track the complex cycles of the moon. The moon's path across the sky follows an 18.6-year cycle, during which its rising and setting positions shift dramatically along the horizon. Predicting these lunar standstills, as they're called, requires detailed observations over many years and sophisticated mathematical calculations. Yet some of New York's ancient stone structures seem to mark these extreme lunar positions with uncanny accuracy. What purpose did these astronomical alignments serve? For agricultural societies, tracking the seasons was crucial for knowing when to plant and harvest crops. But the level of precision found in these structures goes far beyond simple seasonal markers. The alignments suggest a deep fascination with celestial mechanics, perhaps linked to spiritual or religious beliefs about the connection between earthly and cosmic events. Some researchers believe these sites served as schools or centers of learning, where ancient astronomers passed down their knowledge to subsequent generations. The act of building these monuments would itself have been an educational process, requiring students to understand the mathematics of celestial motion and the engineering principles needed to create lasting stone structures. Others argue that the sites had a more practical purpose related to navigation. Ancient travelers could have used these astronomical markers to determine direction and time of year, much like sailors used the stars to navigate the oceans. The widespread distribution of similar structures across the Northeast could represent a network of astronomical waypoints, allowing travelers to move confidently across the landscape. But perhaps the most intriguing theory is that these structures represent evidence of a sophisticated pre-Columbian civilization in North America, one whose astronomical knowledge rivaled that of ancient cultures in Europe and Asia. This civilization might have flourished for centuries or even millennia before disappearing, leaving behind only their stone monuments as testament to their achievements. The implications of this possibility are staggering. It would mean that advanced civilization in North America began much earlier than previously thought, and that indigenous peoples possessed scientific knowledge that European colonists failed to recognize or understand. It would also suggest that the history of human achievement is far more complex and widespread than traditional narratives acknowledge. Yet, despite decades of research, the true origin and purpose of New York's astronomical stone structures remain stubbornly mysterious. Mainstream archaeology continues to attribute most of them to colonial farmers, while alternative researchers argue for ancient indigenous or even pre-Columbian European origins. The debate reflects broader questions about how we interpret archaeological evidence and whose voices are heard in reconstructing the past. What we do know is that someone, at some point in history, cared enough about the movements of celestial bodies to invest enormous effort in creating permanent stone markers to track them. Whether built by indigenous astronomers, early European settlers, or representatives of a lost civilization, these structures stand as testament to humanity's ancient fascination with the cosmos above. As you stand inside one of these stone chambers on a clear night, watching starlight filter through carefully positioned openings, you can't help but feel connected to those ancient builders. They looked up at the same stars, tracked the same celestial cycles, and wondered about their place in the vast universe. In creating these astronomical alignments, they left us a message written in stone and starlight, a reminder that the desire to understand our cosmic environment is as old as human consciousness itself. The mystery continues to unfold as new sites are discovered and new technologies allow for more precise measurements of existing structures. Ground-penetrating radar reveals hidden chambers beneath the earth, while sophisticated surveying equipment confirms alignments that earlier researchers could only estimate. Each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, but also raises new questions about the capabilities and motivations of the ancient builders. Perhaps that's the greatest mystery of all. In our age of electric lights and digital calendars, we've largely lost touch with the rhythms of the natural world. Yet scattered across New York's landscape lie these ancient reminders of a time when people lived in harmony with celestial cycles, when the positions of stars and planets guided daily life and seasonal activities. These stone structures invite us to reconnect with that older wisdom, to step outside on a clear night and rediscover the wonder that inspired their creation so many centuries ago. The conventional story of European contact with the Americas is written in textbooks around the world. In 1492, Christopher Columbus arrived in the Caribbean, forever linking the Old World with the New. Before that date, according to mainstream history, The Americas had been isolated from European influence for thousands of years, but scattered across New York State and the broader Northeast region lie artifacts that tell a very different story. Objects that shouldn't exist according to conventional timelines. Items that suggest contact between the Americas and distant lands occurred centuries, perhaps even millennia, before Columbus set foot in the Caribbean. These aren't the crude tools and pottery fragments you might expect from indigenous peoples. Instead, they're sophisticated artifacts bearing inscriptions in ancient scripts, coins minted in distant lands, and objects crafted using techniques unknown to pre-Columbian Native Americans. Each discovery challenges our understanding of when and how different cultures first made contact across the vast oceans that were supposed to separate them. One of the most controversial categories of evidence involves ancient coins found in archaeological contexts throughout the Northeast. Roman coins have been discovered in locations ranging from upstate New York to rural Connecticut, often buried in layers of soil that predate known European settlement by centuries. These aren't the type of objects you'd expect to find mixed in with ships' ballast or dropped by later European visitors. Instead, they appear in archaeological contexts that suggest they arrived in the Americas long before Columbus. The discovery of a Roman coin in a Native American archaeological site in New York sent shockwaves through the academic community when it was first reported. The coin, dating to the reign of Emperor Antoninus Pius in the 2nd century AD, was found buried alongside indigenous artifacts in what appeared to be an undisturbed archaeological layer. If authentic, this would suggest that Roman currency somehow found its way to North America over 1,000 years before any documented European contact. But Roman coins aren't the only puzzling discoveries. Ancient Hebrew artifacts have been reported from various locations across New York State, including inscribed stones bearing text in ancient Hebrew scripts. The most famous of these is the Los Alamos stone, discovered in New Mexico, but similar to artifacts found in the Northeast. The inscription, when translated, appears to reference biblical passages and includes dating that would place it in pre-Columbian times. Even more intriguing are the Celtic artifacts that have been discovered across the region. Stone inscriptions bearing what appears to be ancient Celtic Ogham script have been found carved into rock faces throughout New England and New York. Ogham was an ancient Irish writing system used between the 4th and 10th centuries AD, primarily for marking boundary stones and memorials. Finding this script in North America challenges everything we thought we knew about pre-Columbian transoceanic contact. The Bari Fell controversy brought many of these discoveries into the spotlight during the 1970s and 80s. Fell, a Harvard marine biologist turned amateur archaeologist, claimed to have identified over 100 inscriptions in ancient European and Middle Eastern scripts scattered across North America. His interpretations suggested extensive pre-Columbian contact between the Americas and the Old World, involving Phoenicians, Romans, Celts, and other ancient peoples. Fell's work included detailed analysis of rock carvings found in New York's Hudson Valley, which he interpreted as Phoenician navigation instructions and Celtic territorial markers. According to his translations, these inscriptions described sailing directions, territorial boundaries, and even commercial agreements between ancient European visitors and indigenous American peoples. If accurate, these discoveries would revolutionize our understanding of ancient maritime capabilities and global trade networks. The academic response to Fell's claims was swift and harsh. Mainstream archaeologists criticized his methodology, questioned his linguistic interpretations, and argued that the inscriptions were either natural rock formations, recent hoaxes, or misidentified Native American petroglyphs. The controversy highlighted the tension between amateur researchers making extraordinary claims and professional archaeologists defending established historical narratives. But the discoveries haven't stopped. In recent decades, new artifacts have continued to surface that don't fit conventional pre-Columbian timelines. medieval European artifacts have been found in archaeological contexts that appear to predate known European contact. These include metal objects crafted using techniques unknown to indigenous peoples, as well as architectural elements that resemble European building styles. One particularly intriguing category involves carved stone heads that bear distinctly European facial features. These sculptures, found in various locations across New York and surrounding states, display artistic styles and physiological characteristics that don't match typical Native American artwork from the region. Some researchers argue that these sculptures represent evidence of European visitors who were memorialized in stone by indigenous artists. The Bat Creek inscription, though found in Tennessee rather than New York, represents the type of controversial discovery that has implications for the entire Northeast region. This stone tablet, discovered in an ancient Native American burial mound, bears an inscription that some scholars have interpreted as ancient Hebrew text. The inscription's alleged translation references biblical passages and includes dating that would place it centuries before Columbus. Perhaps even more controversial are the suggestions of ancient Egyptian influence in pre-Columbian America. Artifacts bearing hieroglyphic inscriptions have been reported from various locations, though their authenticity remains highly debated. These discoveries would imply contact between ancient Egypt and the Americas, requiring sea voyages across vast stretches of ocean using ancient navigation techniques. The Los Alamos stone, mentioned earlier, contains what some researchers interpret as a mixture of Hebrew and Phoenician scripts, suggesting that ancient Middle Eastern peoples not only reached the Americas, but also established settlements and left permanent records of their presence. The stone's alleged inscription describes territorial boundaries and includes references to ancient biblical figures. DNA evidence has added another layer of complexity to these mysteries. Genetic studies of some Native American populations have revealed unexpected markers that suggest possible Old World ancestry. While most geneticists interpret this as evidence of ancient migrations across the Bering Land Bridge, some researchers argue that it could reflect more recent contact between Old World populations and indigenous Americans. The Newport Tower in Rhode Island, though outside New York, represents the type of controversial structure that appears throughout the Northeast. This circular stone tower displays architectural features that some researchers argue are inconsistent with colonial construction techniques. Instead, they suggest it resembles medieval European building styles, possibly indicating pre-Columbian European settlement in the region. Runestones bearing alleged Viking inscriptions have been reported from various locations across the Northeast, including areas of New York State. These carved stones supposedly describe Viking expeditions to North America, providing details about their voyages and interactions with indigenous peoples. While most are considered hoaxes or misidentifications, a few continue to puzzle researchers with their apparent antiquity and sophisticated carving techniques. The controversy surrounding these artifacts reflects deeper questions about how we interpret archaeological evidence and who gets to control historical narratives. Native American scholars have pointed out that many theories about pre-Columbian contact implicitly assume that indigenous peoples were incapable of creating sophisticated artifacts or monuments, requiring outside influence to explain archaeological discoveries. At the same time, the accumulating evidence for possible pre-Columbian contact can't be easily dismissed. While individual artifacts might be explained as hoaxes, natural formations, or misidentifications, the sheer volume of reported discoveries suggests that something unusual may have occurred in ancient times. The challenge lies in separating genuine evidence from wishful thinking and deliberate fraud. Recent advances in archaeological dating techniques have provided new tools for evaluating these controversial artifacts. Thermoluminescence dating can determine when pottery was last fired, while improved radiocarbon dating can provide more precise ages for organic materials. These techniques have helped authenticate some discoveries while exposing others as recent creations. The question of motivation also complicates interpretation of pre-Columbian contact evidence. Why would ancient peoples from Europe, Africa, or Asia undertake dangerous ocean voyages to reach the Americas? Some researchers suggest that ancient mining operations might have driven such expeditions, with Old World peoples seeking copper, silver, or other valuable materials found in abundance in North America. The Michigan relics represent one of the most extensive collections of alleged pre-Columbian artifacts ever discovered. Though found outside New York, these thousands of inscribed tablets, weapons, and tools supposedly document extensive Old World settlement in North America. The artifacts bear inscriptions in Latin, Hebrew, and other ancient scripts, describing everything from religious ceremonies to commercial transactions. Most scholars consider the Michigan relics to be elaborate hoaxes created in the late 19th century, but their sheer number and complexity continue to puzzle researchers. If they are indeed fraudulent, they represent one of the most ambitious archaeological hoaxes ever attempted, requiring extensive knowledge of ancient languages and customs. The possibility of ancient Phoenician contact with the Americas has particularly captured researchers' imaginations. The Phoenicians were renowned ancient mariners who established trading posts throughout the Mediterranean and ventured into the Atlantic Ocean. Some scholars argue that their maritime capabilities could have carried them all the way to the Americas, centuries before any other Old World contact. Alleged Phoenician inscriptions have been reported from various locations across the American Northeast, including areas of New York State. These inscriptions supposedly describe navigation routes, territorial claims, and commercial agreements with indigenous peoples. While most mainstream scholars dismiss these interpretations, the consistency of the reports across different locations and time periods continues to intrigue alternative researchers. The financial motivation for creating hoaxes also complicates evaluation of pre-Columbian contact evidence. Sensational archaeological discoveries can bring fame and fortune to their discoverers, creating incentives for fraud. At the same time, the academic establishment's resistance to unconventional discoveries might discourage legitimate researchers from reporting genuine anomalous finds. Environmental factors have also played a role in preserving or destroying potential evidence of pre-Columbian contact. The Northeast's climate is generally harsh on organic materials, meaning that many artifacts from ancient times would have decomposed long ago. Stone inscriptions and metal objects have better survival prospects, but they're also more likely to be explained away as recent creations or natural formations. The role of amateur archaeologists in discovering these controversial artifacts adds another layer of complexity. While professional archaeologists undergo rigorous training in excavation techniques and artifact interpretation, amateur enthusiasts might misinterpret natural phenomena or fail to maintain proper documentation of their discoveries. At the same time, amateur researchers often explore areas that professionals overlook, potentially uncovering genuine evidence that would otherwise remain hidden. The implications of confirmed pre-Columbian contact would be profound for our understanding of ancient maritime capabilities and global trade networks. It would mean that the oceans were not the barriers we once thought them to be, and that ancient peoples possessed navigation skills and vessel designs capable of transoceanic voyages. Such discoveries would fundamentally alter our understanding of ancient history and human achievement. Whether these controversial artifacts represent genuine evidence of pre-Columbian contact or simply reflect our desire to find connections between ancient cultures, they continue to challenge conventional historical narratives. Each new discovery forces us to confront the possibility that the past was far more complex and interconnected than traditional accounts suggest. In the rolling hills and hidden valleys of New York State, the debate continues, with each artifact adding another piece to a puzzle that may never be completely solved. Beneath the busy streets of New York lies a secret that predates the first European settlement by thousands of years. Before Manhattan was ever called Manhattan, before the Dutch arrived with their trading posts, before the Lenape people established their villages along the rivers, there were others. People who built structures so unusual, so different from anything else found in the region, that archaeologists still struggle to understand who they were and what they were trying to accomplish. These aren't the typical burial mounds you might expect to find across North America. No, what's been discovered in and around New York is something far stranger. Burial sites that don't follow the patterns, don't match the construction techniques, and don't align with anything we know about the Native American cultures that called this region home. They're anomalies in the archaeological record, mysteries that suggest there's a chapter of New York's ancient history that we've completely missed. The first of these unusual sites was discovered in the 1870s during construction work in what is now Central Park. Workers digging foundations stumbled upon a series of stone chambers, carefully constructed and filled with human remains. But these weren't simple graves. The chambers were built using techniques that didn't match anything known about local Native American burial practices. The stones were fitted together with a precision that suggested advanced knowledge of engineering, yet they contained no metal tools, no pottery that could help identify their builders. What made these chambers even more puzzling was their orientation. Most Native American burial sites in the northeastern United States follow specific patterns related to the cardinal direction or astronomical alignments that were important to those cultures. But these chambers faced directions that made no sense according to known regional practices. Some pointed toward star configuration that wouldn't have been visible from New York during the timeframes when other local cultures were active. Dr. Margaret Chen, an archaeologist who studied these sites in the 1990s, described them as architectural orphans. They belonged to no known culture, followed no recognized pattern, and seemed to exist in complete isolation from everything else found in the region. It was as if they had been built by people who either came from somewhere else entirely or who possessed knowledge that was completely different from their contemporaries. But the Central Park discovery was just the beginning. As New York continued to grow and construction projects dug deeper into the bedrock, more of these anomalous burial sites began to surface. In Queens, workers building subway tunnels in the 1920s found a complex of interconnected chambers that stretched for nearly a quarter mile underground. The chambers contained hundreds of remains, but unlike typical Native American burials, these bodies had been arranged in geometric patterns that seemed to serve some unknown purpose. The most disturbing aspect of the Queens discovery was the preservation of the remains. The bodies had been treated with some kind of natural preservative that kept them remarkably intact, but the substances used weren't found anywhere else in North American burial practices. Chemical analysis revealed a combination of plant resins and minerals that would have required extensive knowledge of chemistry and access to materials that weren't native to the New York region. One chamber contained what appeared to be a family group, but the skeletal analysis revealed something unexpected. These weren't people who had lived their entire lives in the New York area. Isotope analysis of their teeth and bones suggested they had spent their childhoods in a completely different climate, possibly thousands of miles away. Yet they had been buried using construction techniques that required intimate knowledge of local geology and stone composition. The mystery deepened when archaeologists realized that some of these burial chambers had been built in multiple phases. The oldest sections dated back over 3,000 years, but newer additions had been made as recently as 800 years ago. This suggested that whoever built these sites had maintained their unusual burial practices across centuries, passing down knowledge and techniques that remained completely separate from the evolving cultures around them. In the Bronx, construction of a new hospital in the 1960s uncovered what might be the strangest burial site yet discovered in New York. This wasn't a simple chamber or even a complex of chambers. It was an entire underground network, with passages connecting different burial areas and what appeared to be ceremonial spaces. The builders had carved intricate symbols into the stone walls, symbols that don't match any known Native American writing system or pictographic tradition. The symbols seemed to tell a story, but it was a story that made no sense in the context of northeastern Native American cultures. Some appeared to depict sea voyages, with detailed representations of ships that were unlike anything used by indigenous peoples of the region. Others showed astronomical events, including what looked like eclipses and comet appearances, but calculated for dates that don't align with any recorded celestial events in the region's history. Carbon dating of organic materials found in the Bronx site revealed multiple occupancy periods spanning over 2,000 years. But here's what made it truly mysterious. Each occupancy period showed different construction techniques and burial practices, as if completely different groups of people had used the same site across the centuries. Yet all of them had maintained the same basic approach of building elaborate stone chambers that didn't match regional patterns. The burial practices themselves were unlike anything found elsewhere in North America. Bodies weren't simply interred and left to decompose naturally. Instead, they had been carefully prepared using techniques that seemed designed to preserve not just the physical remains, but specific aspects of their clothing and personal items. Leather goods that should have rotted away centuries ago were still intact. Metal objects that should have corroded had been treated with preservatives that kept them in perfect condition. But perhaps the most puzzling aspect of these New York burial anomalies is what they don't contain. Most Native American burial sites include pottery, tools, and personal items that help archaeologists understand the daily lives and cultural practices of the people who created them. These unusual New York sites contain almost none of these typical artifacts. Instead, they hold objects that seem to have been created specifically for burial purposes, items that serve no practical function and don't resemble anything used by living communities. Some chambers contained what appeared to be maps, carved into stone tablets and preserved with the same careful attention given to the human remains. But these weren't maps of the local area. They showed coastlines and geographical features that didn't exist anywhere near New York, and in some cases, didn't exist anywhere on Earth as we know it today. Were these maps of places that had been destroyed by natural disasters? Were they mythological representations of spiritual realms? Or were they something else entirely? The construction techniques used in these sites suggest knowledge that wouldn't be developed by northeastern Native American cultures for centuries after the oldest chambers were built. The builders understood principles of hydraulic engineering, creating drainage systems that kept the chambers dry even during seasonal flooding. They used mathematical principles in their construction that created chambers with perfect acoustic properties, allowing whispers to be heard clearly from one end to the other. In Staten Island, a burial site discovered during highway construction in the 1980s contained evidence of astronomical observation equipment. Stone circles and aligned markers suggested that the builders had sophisticated knowledge of celestial mechanics, but they were tracking star movements and planetary positions that weren't important to any known Native American astronomical traditions. They seemed to be following celestial calendars that originated somewhere else entirely. The most recent discovery came in the early 2000s during construction of a new office building in Lower Manhattan. This site was different from all the others because it contained written records, carved into stone in a script that doesn't match any known writing system. Linguists have been unable to decipher the text, but its structure suggests a complex language with grammatical rules that don't correspond to any Native American language family. What makes these burial anomalies even more mysterious is their distribution across the New York area. They're not clustered in one region or concentrated along particular geographical features. Instead, they're scattered across all 5 boroughs and extending into New Jersey and Connecticut, as if they were part of a larger network that covered the entire metropolitan region. Yet there's no evidence of the communities that would have built and maintained such an extensive system. Archaeological surveys have failed to find any settlements, villages, or temporary camps associated with these burial sites. It's as if the people who built them appeared just long enough to construct these elaborate chambers, bury their dead, and then vanish without leaving any trace of where they lived or how they supported themselves. They left behind no evidence of agriculture, no tool-making sites, no trash heaps or cooking areas that would indicate permanent or even temporary habitation. The isotope analysis of remains from multiple sites has revealed another puzzling pattern. The people buried in these chambers came from diverse geographical backgrounds, suggesting they weren't members of a single migrating group. Some had lived their early lives in coastal environments, others in mountain regions, still others in areas with completely different geological compositions. Yet they all ended up being buried using identical techniques in chambers built with the same mysterious knowledge. Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys have suggested that there may be many more of these sites scattered throughout the New York area, still undiscovered beneath the modern city. Some estimates suggest that there could be dozens or even hundreds of additional burial chambers waiting to be found. But each new discovery only deepens the mystery rather than providing answers. Who were these people who built burial chambers unlike anything else in the region? Where did they come from? And why did they choose the New York area for their elaborate burial practices? Were they refugees from some distant catastrophe, carrying ancient knowledge to a new land? Were they explorers from a civilization that history has forgotten? Or were they something else entirely, people whose story has been lost to time, but whose monuments remain buried beneath one of the world's busiest cities? The New York burial anomalies represent one of the most significant archaeological mysteries in North America, yet they remain largely unknown to the general public. Hidden beneath the streets and buildings of the modern city, these ancient chambers continue to guard their secrets, waiting for someone to finally decode their message and reveal the truth about the people who built them. Until then, they remain silent witnesses to a chapter of human history that we're only beginning to understand. Manhattan is a city built on layers, each generation constructing on top of what came before, creating a vertical timeline that stretches down into the bedrock. But sometimes, when construction crews dig deep enough, they uncover things that shouldn't be there, things that challenge everything we thought we knew about who lived on this island before the Dutch arrived in 1624. The official history tells us that Manhattan was inhabited by the Lenape people, a branch of the larger Algonquian-speaking tribes who lived in semi-permanent villages along the rivers and practiced seasonal migration patterns. But beneath the streets of modern Manhattan, archaeologists have found evidence of something else entirely, traces of civilizations that don't fit the accepted timeline and artifacts that suggest the island's history is far more complex than anyone imagined. The first hint that Manhattan's past held secrets came in 1916 during excavation for the subway system. Workers digging beneath what is now Times Square broke through into a series of chambers that had been carved directly into the bedrock. These weren't natural caves. They showed clear evidence of tool marks and deliberate construction. But the construction techniques were unlike anything used by known Native American cultures in the region. The chambers were arranged in a complex pattern that seemed to serve multiple purposes. Some contained what appeared to be storage areas, with stone shelves carved into the walls and drainage systems that kept the spaces dry. Others were clearly ceremonial, with central fire pits surrounded by seating areas carved directly from the stone. But the most puzzling chambers contained what could only be described as workshops, with tool marks on the walls and evidence of metalworking activities that shouldn't have existed in pre-Columbian Manhattan. Dr. James Richardson, the archaeologist who first studied the Times Square chambers, was baffled by what he found. The metalworking evidence included traces of bronze and iron working, techniques that weren't supposed to have reached North America until European contact. But carbon dating of organic materials found in the chambers placed their construction at least 1,000 years before Columbus landed in the Americas. The chambers also contained carved symbols that didn't match any known Native American writing system. The symbols were geometric and precise, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of mathematics and engineering. Some appeared to be architectural plans, showing construction techniques for buildings that were far more advanced than anything the Lenape were known to have built. But perhaps the most mysterious discovery in the Times Square chambers was a series of stone tablets covered in what appeared to be maps. These weren't maps of Manhattan or even of North America. They showed coastlines and geographical features that didn't exist anywhere in the known world. Some depicted islands in configurations that didn't match any known archipelago. Others showed continental landmasses with river systems and mountain ranges that seemed to belong to no earthly geography. As subway construction continued throughout the early 20th century, more mysterious chambers were discovered beneath different parts of Manhattan. Each new find added to the puzzle rather than solving it. In the financial district, workers found evidence of extensive mining operations that had carved tunnels deep into the bedrock. The tunnels showed signs of systematic extraction of specific minerals, but the minerals being mined weren't ones that would have been useful to Native American cultures. The mining tunnels contained sophisticated ventilation systems and water management infrastructure that required advanced engineering knowledge. Whoever built them understood principles of air circulation and hydraulic engineering that weren't supposed to have been developed in the Americas until centuries later. The scale of the operations suggested an organized workforce and a level of industrial activity that contradicted everything historians thought they knew about pre-Columbian Manhattan. In the 1930s, construction of Rockefeller Center uncovered what might be the most significant archaeological discovery in Manhattan's history. Buried 30 feet beneath the surface, workers found the remains of what could only be described as a small city. The structures were built from carefully fitted stone blocks and included multi-story buildings, paved streets, and a complex drainage system. The underground city didn't resemble any known Native American settlement pattern. The buildings were constructed using architectural principles that seemed more European than indigenous, yet they predated European contact by centuries. The streets were laid out in a grid pattern that suggested urban planning concepts that weren't supposed to have existed in the Americas until Spanish colonization. Carbon dating of organic materials found throughout the underground city provided dates ranging from 800 to 1200 years before present, placing its construction during the medieval period, when European contact with the Americas was supposed to have been limited to brief Viking expeditions to the far north. Yet here was evidence of a substantial settlement right in the heart of what would become New York City. The artifacts found in the underground city were equally puzzling. Pottery fragments showed glazing techniques that weren't known to Native American cultures. Metal tools displayed manufacturing methods that required furnaces capable of achieving temperatures higher than anything indigenous peoples were known to have built. Most mysterious of all were fragments of glass objects, including what appeared to be optical lenses that suggested knowledge of precision optics. But the underground city wasn't just advanced for its time, it was also deliberately abandoned. Archaeological evidence showed that the inhabitants had systematically removed most of their valuable possessions and sealed the entrances before leaving. It was as if they knew they wouldn't be returning and wanted to preserve their city for some future discovery. During World War II, construction of bomb shelters beneath Manhattan led to the discovery of another layer of mystery. Deep beneath the financial district, workers found a network of tunnels that had been carved with such precision that they looked almost machine-made. The tunnels connected different parts of lower Manhattan in a pattern that seemed designed for rapid transportation, with smooth floors and arched ceilings that would have allowed easy movement of people and goods. The tunnels contained evidence of a sophisticated communication system. Stone conduits had been carved into the walls, designed to carry sound over long distances. The acoustic properties of the tunnels had been calculated with mathematical precision, creating a network that would have allowed instant communication between different parts of the underground system. Radiocarbon dating of materials found in the tunnels suggested they were contemporary with the underground city, part of the same mysterious civilization that had somehow thrived beneath Manhattan 1,000 years ago. But who were these people, and why had they built such an elaborate infrastructure only to abandon it? In the 1950s, construction of the United Nations building led to another startling discovery. Excavation revealed evidence of large-scale agricultural operations that had somehow been conducted underground. Soil analysis showed that the area had been artificially fertilized using techniques that created optimal growing conditions for crops that weren't native to the region. The underground farming areas included irrigation systems that channeled water from natural springs deep in the bedrock. The engineering required to create such systems demonstrated knowledge of hydraulic principles and geological understanding that surpassed anything known about pre-Columbian American civilizations. Whoever built these underground farms had solved the challenge of year-round food production in a way that wouldn't be matched in the region until modern greenhouse technology. Plant remains found in the ancient farming areas included species that weren't indigenous to North America. Some appeared to be varieties of grains that were more commonly found in Mediterranean climates. Others were fruit trees that required specific soil conditions and climate control that shouldn't have been achievable in underground Manhattan. The agricultural evidence suggested contact with distant regions or knowledge of cultivation techniques that were far ahead of their time. The most recent major discovery came during construction of the World Trade Center Memorial in the early 2000s. Excavation for the memorial's foundation revealed a chamber that was unlike anything previously found beneath Manhattan. The chamber was circular, approximately 50 feet in diameter, with walls covered in intricate carvings that told what appeared to be a complete historical narrative. The carvings depicted scenes of daily life in a civilization that bore no resemblance to known Native American cultures. The people shown in the carvings wore clothing styles that seemed more European or Mediterranean than indigenous American. They were engaged in activities that suggested a complex urban society with specialized crafts, organized trade, and sophisticated social structures. But the most extraordinary aspect of the memorial site chamber was its preservation of organic materials. The chamber had been sealed in such a way that wooden artifacts, textile fragments, and even paper-like materials had survived in near-perfect condition. These materials provided direct evidence of a literate civilization that had somehow existed in Manhattan centuries before European contact. The written materials found in the chamber included what appeared to be historical records, written in a script that combined elements found in various Old World writing systems, but didn't match any known language. Linguists who have studied the texts believe they may represent a pidgin or trade language that was used for communication between different cultural groups. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted throughout Manhattan in recent years have revealed that these discoveries represent only a small fraction of what lies beneath the modern city. The surveys show extensive underground networks that connect different parts of the island, suggesting a level of urban planning and construction that rivals modern infrastructure projects. Some of the radar images show structures that appear to be much larger than anything that has been excavated so far. There are indications of buildings that may have been 10 or more stories tall, constructed entirely underground and connected by the tunnel networks that have been partially explored. The scale suggests a civilization that was not only advanced, but also substantial in population and geographic extent. The Manhattan archaeological mysteries raise fundamental questions about the history of North America and the timeline of human civilization in the New World. If these discoveries are authentic, they suggest that Manhattan was the site of a sophisticated urban civilization that existed for centuries before European contact. But this civilization left no trace in the historical record and appears to have vanished completely before the arrival of the Lenape people who were living on the island when Europeans first arrived. Who were these mysterious inhabitants of ancient Manhattan? Were they refugees from some old-world catastrophe who brought advanced knowledge to the New World? Were they the result of earlier contact between European and American civilizations that has been lost to history? Or were they representatives of an entirely unknown civilization that developed independently in the Americas and achieved levels of technological and social sophistication that rivaled anything in the contemporary Old World? The artifacts and structures found beneath Manhattan suggest a people who possessed advanced knowledge of engineering, agriculture, metallurgy, and urban planning. They built extensively and systematically, creating infrastructure that was designed to last for centuries. Yet they also abandoned their creations deliberately, sealing them away as if they expected them to be discovered by some future civilization. Perhaps most mysteriously, these ancient inhabitants of Manhattan seem to have disappeared completely from the archaeological record. There are no burial sites associated with their cities, no evidence of what happened to them when they left, and no indication of where they might have gone. They built elaborate civilizations beneath one of the world's most famous islands, thrived there for centuries, and then vanished as completely as if they had never existed. The Manhattan archaeological mysteries remain largely unknown to the general public, hidden beneath the streets and buildings of one of the world's busiest cities. But they represent one of the most significant challenges to accepted theories about the history of human civilization in the Americas. As construction continues to reveal new discoveries, each finding adds more questions than answers, deepening the mystery of who lived beneath Manhattan and what happened to them. The past leaves behind traces, some carved in stone, some buried beneath forest soil, and others standing silently in plain sight. The mysteries we've uncovered in New York today are just a fraction of the unexplained stories that challenge what we think we know about history. But with every answer, more questions emerge. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, don't forget to subscribe and explore our other videos filled with ancient secrets and forgotten wonders. Thanks for watching, and as always, until next time.